I'm going to conclude tonight the reason for God. This session is called The Ultimate Reason to Believe in Christianity. The ultimate reason. 13 sessions we've done. It goes by quickly every time, doesn't it? 13 sessions we've done. The ultimate reason to believe in Christianity. And what we did in the first half of the series is we tore down the arguments against Christianity by a secular world. The arguments that they throw up to destroy Christianity, we have torn them down. And then we looked at the second half of the series, the positive reasons why Christianity is true. And what I want to do tonight is I want to end by talking about the ultimate reason to believe in Christianity. Here's the truth, church. Jesus himself is the ultimate argument for why we should believe in Christianity. We could talk about all these other things, and they are good to talk about, they are good to think through, they are good to work through, but it is Jesus himself that is the main argument for why people should believe in Christianity. The man that Christians call Jesus Christ all over the world is the single most influential human being ever to live. There is no question about it. This can be seen not only as we look back in the past, our entire dating system is dated around the life of Jesus Christ, but not simply by looking back at the church that started and how the Christianity grew and originated, but it can also be seen by looking into the future. Today, a greater percentage of the world's population is Christian than ever before. Did you know that? Today, a greater percentage of the world's population is Christian than ever before. Now, what we tend to do is we tend to only look at the culture we live in. And we say, well, man, Christianity doesn't seem like it's doing great in America. Well, let's not forget, America is not the world. The fastest growing church in the world is the church in China. The fastest growing church in the world is the church in China. Second is South America, and third is Africa. So the church of Jesus Christ is growing, and it is now a greater percentage than ever before. Christianity adds 50,000 converts every day. That is 19 million new people every year. Christianity is a world religion like no other religion can even fathom to be. Christianity was a world religion long before it was a Western religion. Okay? We have this idea in our minds, because we are Americans, that Christianity really was depended upon America. And let's just understand that Christianity was a world religion before it ever got to America. Remember what I've said this multiple times. When Jesus told the disciples to be my witnesses in Judea, Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and the uttermost parts of the earth, America, where we would fall in that, is the uttermost parts of the earth part of that. Okay? The fact that America has Christians in it is proof that the Great Commission and the command of Jesus has been followed. Because we got the gospel. Alright? It was a world... Christianity, I'm about to read a book called The History of Christianity in Africa. Christianity in Africa was blowing up. And then it moved from the Middle East to Africa into the East, and then it trickled and made its way to the West. So we've got to understand that no other religion crosses cultures like this. No, for instance, if you ask, where is Hinduism? Where is it really popular? Well, it's in a central localized area, right? Islam, where is it really? Central localized area. You can look at every religion on the planet and you see this massive cluster of a dramatic percentage of Islam is in one area. A massive percentage. That doesn't mean there's not anywhere else in the world, but it is conglomerated in these certain central areas. Because then you look at Christianity. I actually saw a map where it showed each major religion and how each major religion has spread. And what you see is that the places that Islam started, Hinduism started, Buddhism started, the places they started, it's still the vast majority of those, that area is still that religion. And then you look at the Christian map, and the whole world gets lit up with massive segments of society. No other religion gets to boast that. No other religion gets to talk about that. No other religion reaches across cultures like Christianity. And this can all be attributed to one person, Jesus. So what we're going to do tonight, some of it will be a review or just a kind of way of refreshing us, a few things that we talked about, and then some things will be new. I'm going to talk about the sources, which we've already addressed a little bit, about the Gospels. I'm going to talk about the character of Jesus, which we haven't talked about. And then I'm going to talk about the claims that Jesus made, and then the resurrection. So let's talk about the sources of Jesus first. And when I say sources, what I'm mainly talking about is Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, right? The four Gospels, which are the first four books of what we call the New Testament. And there is little doubt, okay? There is almost complete consensus among the scholarly world that Jesus Christ existed. He is an actual historical figure. Nobody with any legitimacy argues that he did not exist. What does get argued is what he did, what he claimed to be. The reliability of the Gospels gets argued. The Gospels are in no manner written, if you remember us talking about this, the Gospels are not written like legends. There's too much detail that is given to us that doesn't push the plot along for it to be legend. When we read folklore, legend, any kind of fiction, okay, things don't get put in unless it drives the story and drives the plot. But we get details in the gospel that doesn't progress the plot. And the reason why they're included is because they are true. They are things that happen that are true. The Gospels were either written by eyewitnesses, like John, for instance, either written by eyewitnesses, like Matthew, for instance, or it was written by someone who interviewed eyewitnesses. Mark is probably Peter's account of the life of Jesus. Luke, in verse 2, tells us, listen, other people have written now after doing interviews and talking to eyewitness testimonies, I too am writing. So what we have in the gospel are eyewitness accounts of things that occurred. The Gospels even go out of their way to name some eyewitnesses. According to the accepted historical biographical custom, that is exactly what people would do. When they wrote true things, they would name eyewitnesses that could be talked to and interviewed to prove that these things actually did happen. The Gospels are also include parts of the story that include embarrassing or failing stories about the church's leaders. I mean, think about it. If you are writing a story and you want to prop Peter up as one of the leaders of this church that's going to start, do you include some of the things that the Gospels include about Peter? No. His lack of faith when he walks on the water and then he goes down, the fact that he wants to live by the sword, and Jesus says those who live by the sword die by the sword, put away your sword. The fact that he denies Jesus 3 times, like that's embarrassing stuff that you would want to leave out. If you were just writing a legend story to bolster Christianity, you would leave that stuff out, but yet it's included. Why? Because it's true. This isn't legend, this isn't folklore, this is true. So, we had a whole session about that. I just wanted to kind of go back over those. You've got, it's not written like any kind of legend or folklore. You have eyewitness testimonies. You have embarrassing things in it that would not have been included if it was simply just a way to prop up a new religion. And so the sources that we have, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, a case can easily be built that we have accurate representation of who Jesus Christ was. Now the question is, Well, what does it say about him? What kind of man are we dealing with here? It's striking to me when you read Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John that you never get a description of the physical attributes of Jesus. We don't know how tall he was. We don't know what he looked like. We don't, again, if you're writing a story of legend, that'd be stuff you include, right? We don't have any of that. Because what he looked like didn't matter. The contents of his character is what mattered. What Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John write, they do it in such a way that we focus on the character of this man. Who he was. Jonathan Edwards talked about the character of Jesus Christ by discussing what he calls diverse excellencies. Things that should not go together in a person somehow beautifully settling together in Jesus. Things that we would not think one person could be. These diverse things somehow come together beautifully in Christ. Let me give you some examples. And many people have written about this. We are amazed to see tenderness in Jesus without weakness. Sometimes you find a tender person and their fault is that they're too weak sometimes. But not with Jesus. With Jesus, you see tenderness without weakness. But then you turn around and you see boldness without harshness. Jesus is bold, but he's not harsh. You see humility without any uncertainty. In fact, you see humility with great confidence. We're stunned to discover that Jesus had these unbending convictions, yet he was totally approachable. He insisted always on truth, but it was always bathed in love. He has power without being insensitive. He has integrity without being rigid. He has passion without prejudice. See, what we usually see is one or the other in a person. Someone who has really strong convictions, sometimes they come across too harsh. Someone who is very bold, sometimes they don't come across with enough humility. That's what we see in normal human beings. But with Jesus, we didn't see any of that. We always see these things that don't fit in anybody else's life that we know, yet somehow they completely come together in Jesus. One of the most recognized combinations of Jesus' life was truth and love. Right? Wouldn't it be the two things that we would characterize Jesus as? Truth and love. Jesus astonished everyone when he ate with tax collectors. That is not something you did if you were a Jew. You hated tax collectors because they worked a racketeering scheme for the Roman Empire. Yet Jesus ate with them. This outraged those who were zealous against oppression and injustice. How dare Jesus go and meet with somebody who is so unjust like Zacchaeus? Yet, Jesus would also welcome prostitutes and eat with prostitutes. And that defended those who love traditional morality. He deliberately and intentionally touched lepers, yet ate with Pharisees, showing that he wasn't even bigoted toward the bigoted. Even though Jesus was welcoming to all, and he was, loving and welcoming to all, he tipped off both sides. He made the religious people mad. He made then he would turn around and he'd make the non-religious people mad. Yet constantly bearing witness to the truth. What happens when Zacchaeus meets with Jesus? He ends up taking everything that he had stolen and giving it back, plus some. Did that happen just because he ate lunch? Or did Jesus confront him in his sin? Love and truth changed Zacchaeus' life. He told the adulterous woman, right? stop sinning. Think about that story. Think about that story. Here's all the religious people condemning this woman. Okay? Because she was an adulterous woman. And Jesus comes to her defense and says, let anyone who has not sinned cast the first stone. Okay? So there's the love right there. And then he turns to this woman after everybody leaves. And he doesn't say, hey, where did everybody go? All right, you just go on about your life. He looked at her and says, stop sinning. Love and truth coming together in Jesus beautifully. He gently pointed out to a Samaritan woman at the well that the wreckage of her failed relationships were causing so much damage. And he told her where to find satisfaction. He loved her in a way that surprised her. But then he confronted her. He left her with truth. As John 1:14 says, we have seen his glory as the only Son from the Father, full of grace and truth. We could go on and on about the diverse excellencies of Jesus. Things that we do not see in normal people coming together perfectly in Christ. Keeping along this same thread of thought, everyone in this room has a temperament, right? Every single person in this room has a temperament. All right, we could go around and we could ask the people that know you best, what kind of temperament does so-and-so have? Oh, well, they're bold and they're truth-speaking and someone said, well, they're very, reserved and quiet and kind of pulled back and some people are rational and other people are intuitive. Some people are quick to lead. Other people like to get a consensus. Some people are outspoken. Some are soft-spoken. We all have a temperament. And here's what we tend to do. We tend to deal with people based upon our temperament. Right? Because our temperament is natural for us, it's the way that we naturally feel, then we tend to deal with people based upon our temperament. So if you are a soft-spoken person, when you talk to someone or you're dealing with a situation, you will be soft-spoken. If you're a humble person and you're dealing with a situation, you will be humble. If you're outspoken or if you're bold, or we deal with that. Now here's the problem, is that not all situations need your natural temperament. Right? If all you ever do is deal with a situation with your natural temperament, you're not going to be able to minister to as many people as you would be able to. Because there are situations where you have to step out of what's natural for you and exhibit a temperament that is different than what's natural. Sometimes you may be a soft-spoken person. Sometimes there's a time to speak up, isn't it? Maybe you're not. Maybe you're really, really bold, and sometimes you just need to pull back and be quiet. Now, here's what's amazing. While this leaves us vulnerable because we don't always give what the situation warrants, Jesus, however, appears in the Gospels to be the most versatile and wise person ever. We never see Jesus being tender when he needs to be strong. We never see him being strong when he needs to be tender. He is blunt and confrontational with a respected religious leader. But in the very next chapter, he is patient and gentle with the woman who is a social outcast. Jesus never treats someone except for the exact way they need to be treated. We'll never meet anybody like that. Who always, in every situation, gives exactly what is needed. It's amazing to me when you look at the life of Jesus. Right? Jesus is meek. But Jesus is the same guy that walked into the temple and flipped over tables and whipped animals and caused a massive uproar at the outskirts of the temple. And we look at that, but guess what? That means that in that moment, that's what was needed. Then other times you see Jesus just sitting down with kids, talking to them, saying, don't hold the kids back. Bring those kids over here and let me play with them. I've always been one thing that I've always found beautiful about Jesus is that the kids wanted to come to him, and the intellectual religious leaders never could stop him. This has got to be the wisest person ever to live. Perfectly demonstrating exactly what is needed in every situation. We also can't help but look at the freedom that Jesus had. Here's a couple things that we see. Jesus was free of prejudice, wasn't he? Jesus was not confined to the rigid racial and gender barriers of the day. Everybody else would go, every other Jew would go around Samaria. Jesus went right through it. Why? It didn't matter to him whether they were Samaritan or Jewish. He did things. You want to talk about someone who cared about gender equality? It was Jesus. Jesus ministered in a way to women that no religious leader of his day was doing. Jesus was free of prejudice. He associated and he ate with all sorts of people, high and low, different races, different backgrounds, different genders. He ministered to them all. He was also free to interpret the scriptures in a way that wasn't being interpreted by everybody else. Jesus would step into a conversation as they're talking about the scriptures, and Jesus would go, no, that's not what any of that means. I am free from your interpretation of what you think this means. Let me correct you on that. Let me demonstrate to you what this is really all about. Jesus was also free of fear. Jesus constantly said to people, fear not, fear not, fear not. Don't be afraid of the storm. Don't be afraid of death. Jesus was the freest person that any of us have ever met. Wisdom and freedom combining in Jesus. What about the claims of Jesus? There have been many people who have lived in such a way that people have had to ask, who is this guy? Like, who are you? There have been all kinds of people that have lived extraordinary lives, that have made the average person say, who is this guy? Like, what's this guy all about? I mean, for good or bad. Like, what is this guy all about? But there's only been one person that has lived that has made people say, what are you? I want you to think about that question. They didn't just ask who Jesus was. They asked, what are you? You're doing things that we've never seen anybody do. What kind of human being are you? I mean, to the point that the religious people were saying of Jesus, he's got to be a demon-possessed man. I mean, to have the power that he has and to do the things that he has to be demon-possessed. What are you? His life was so transcendent from the ordinary human life, it made this question necessary. And know what his answer was? I'm the God of the universe. What are you? I'm the God of the universe. Right here among you. Right here with you. I am the God of the universe. Let me walk you through this and see if it hits you the way it hit me. Jesus founded a great world religion, correct? But other people have done that. Muhammad did that. Buddha did that. I mean, there are other people who have started and founded great world religions. I'm not talking about little tiny religions here, I'm talking about the great major world religions of the world. Joseph Smith with Mormonism. There have been people who have started great major religions, and Jesus is one of those who have started a great major religion. However, Jesus is also among those who claim to be God. Okay, so think with me here, right? So you have people who have started great major religions besides Jesus. You also have people over here who claim to be God. Guess what you don't have? You don't have anybody that is true of both of them. For instance, David Koresh. Remember David Koresh? Mm-hmm. Right? God claimed to be Jesus, come back, claimed to be God. It's crazy. Right? He didn't get a huge following. It's heartbreaking that he got anybody to follow him, but he didn't get a huge following. He had, a small group of people that followed him. Everybody else thought he was nuts. Okay? There are other people. Do you remember the Hellbot comic cult? You remember that? Where they all put the same clothes on and had the same shoes on, and then they all committed suicide when the Hellbot comet was coming by because they thought that the apocalypse was going to come on the end of that. And you have got people throughout history who have called themselves God that have got a small following of people. But guess what you do not have? In the history of the world, you do not have any of these people that started a great religion also claiming over here to be God. Except for one. Jesus. Jesus is the only one who started a major religion and claimed to be God. Now I want you to think about it. Why is it that you should not claim to be God if you're starting a major religion? Because most people won't believe you're God. They may believe that you're a prophet from God. They may believe that you've heard from God, but they're not going to believe you're actually God. If Muhammad had told people he was Allah, it never would have blown up. Okay? Because they know you. And as good as you might be, they still know you. So these people over here who start major world religions do not claim to be God. Yet Jesus started a major world religion and claimed to be God and has gotten billions of people to believe it. No one who has ever claimed to be God has gotten a large mass of people to believe he was, except Jesus. He is the only person ever to say, I am God, and then people rallied around him saying, yes, you are. That hit me so profoundly. Because I see the people who start major world religions, and I see the people that claim to be God. Those two don't get to mix. It doesn't work. Unless, in fact, you are God, and your character is such that everyone would believe you are. That's what we have in Jesus. People actually believed that Jesus was God. And so when he institutes a brand new religion, well, it's not really a brand new religion, it was the fulfillment of an old religion. People believe it. Of course, you cannot have a discussion about the life of Jesus without talking about his resurrection. Easter will be coming up here in 2 weeks. And there have been entire books dedicated to the proofs of the resurrection. In fact, there have been entire volumes written on the proofs of the resurrection. All I'm going to do tonight is mention 3 things that demonstrate that the resurrection is true. That Jesus Christ did, in fact, resurrect. Number 1, the empty tomb. The tomb is empty. The body of Jesus has never been found. Ever. And make no mistake about it, those that doubted Jesus or didn't want this Christian movement to start, if they would have found his body, they would have absolutely demonstrated that they found his body and presented it to everybody because they wanted to squash that rebellion quick. So if his body had ever been found by the Romans or ever been found by the religious Jewish people, it would have been revealed to everybody. His body never was found. There is an empty tomb. And again, just because you rise from the dead. Remember I told you that, I don't know if I said it in here, I said it upstairs. Everything runs together in my mind, guys. We did a whole session upstairs on the resurrection of Jesus with Refuge. And but probably my favorite atheist who ever lived, Christopher Hitchens. He was just a funny dude. And witty and smart and funny and, of course, completely wrong on everything, but witty and fart and smutty? Smart and funny. He He would say this. He would say, just because you rose from the dead doesn't prove you're God. And he's absolutely correct about that. Just because you rise from the dead does not prove that you're God. However, if you tell people that you're going to die, and you tell people how long you're going to be dead, and when you're going to rise from the dead, that does prove you're God. So if I am riding on a bus, and in fact, this was in a debate, Christopher Hitchens said, if I'm riding on a bus and the guy next to me claims that he is going to rise from the dead, that doesn't mean he's God. And Doug Wilson responded, yeah, but if he tells you exactly when he's going to die and how he's going to die and when he's going to rise from the dead, and then that happens, he is God. And Christopher Hitchens had no comeback for that whatsoever. So the empty tomb, the body's never been recovered, it's never been displayed. There aren't even any writings around the time of Jesus saying that the body was found. Number 2, you have the testimony of the eyewitnesses. Think about this. Paul was able to say, roughly 20 years after the resurrection, Paul was able to say that there were hundreds of people who saw Jesus resurrected, and most of them are still alive. Now, why would Paul say that? Why would Paul say and most of them are still alive? Because you can go talk to them. Paul was saying, listen, there are hundreds of people that Jesus showed himself to after his resurrection, that talked with him, that ate with him, that fellowshiped with him after his resurrection, and most of them are still alive if you want to go talk to them. Find out about those conversations. Now that is an impressive evidence for the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Paul didn't say, oh, hey, by the way, Jesus was resurrected, and take my word for it, guys. He's saying Jesus was resurrected, and if you don't believe me, go talk to the people who saw him. Hear their stories. Of course, the first witnesses of the resurrection were women. This is important because in that day, a woman's testimony was not even admissible in court. Yet God saw fit to reveal himself first to women. Meaning, if I am making up the resurrection of Jesus, if I'm making it up, I am not going to have him first show up to women. Because their testimony is not going to carry the same weight as a testimony of a man. I'm going to have Jesus show up first to men so that when they give a testimony, their testimony will be believed. Women's testimony was not believed. So what would be the point of making up a religion and having women be the first ones to see Jesus when their testimony was not even admissible in court? No one would believe the testimony of a woman. The only reasonable, logical conclusion why we have a record of Jesus appearing to women first is because Jesus appeared to women first. It's true. That's exactly what happened. The eyewitness testimonies of the resurrection of Jesus Christ bear witness to the truth of the resurrection. And third, the impact of the resurrection on the followers of Jesus. When Jesus was arrested, except for John, where did all his disciples go? Running scared. Locking themselves in a way, or not locking themselves away in a room, fearing for their lives. Remember this morning I said the cross was a statement? They knew what the statement was, and that's why they were running. Because they knew this rebellion was that Rome was going to try to put down this rebellion. So they ran and they hid. And Peter denied Jesus 3 times. They were intimidated. They were scared. And yet, in a matter of a few days, they went from being intimidated and scared to being willing to die for their claim that Jesus was alive again. Think with me. What is the only reasonable, logical conclusion we can come to that a group of people were scared to death, thinking it's over, it's done. Everything Jesus said is now, what he said he was going to do, it is through. We're scared for our own lives. We're locking ourselves away. We're hiding away, to all of a sudden now, standing up about a month later, standing up, Peter, in front of thousands and thousands of people and saying, Jesus Christ is who he said he was, and he rose again from the dead. And all of these people dying for their faith. Dying for their faith. Now, it is true. People will die for what they believe in. That is a true statement. People will die for what they believe in. Okay? The reason why Muslims blow themselves up, okay, extremist Muslims blow themselves up, is because they believe what they're doing is right. They believe it. As wrong as it is, they truly believe it. They're not doing it because they think it's hogwash. They're doing it because they think this is right and real. No one gives up their life for a lie. You will die for what you believe in. You will not die for what you know is a lie. If the apostles made all this up, if the apostles made up the resurrection of Jesus Christ, then when push came to shove, and it was death or denounce the fact that Jesus is risen from the dead, the only logical and reasonable conclusion we can come to is that the apostles believed Jesus Christ had risen from the dead. Because I am not about to die for what I know I'm making up. They believed it with all of their being that Jesus Christ is alive. So kill him. Guys, when we look at the sources of Jesus, when we look at the character of Jesus, when we look at the claims Jesus made, and we look at the resurrection of Jesus, the only reasonable conclusion about the life of Jesus, given his character, his claims, his resurrection, is that he is who he said he was. And to believe otherwise is to be illogical and unreasonable. You can say that you do not care who Jesus is. People will say that. I don't care who Jesus is. You can say he's a liar. You can say he was mentally ill. But in order to do this, you must be unreasonable. You must be unreasonable. Because we have demonstrated tonight, and we have demonstrated throughout this series, it is reasonable, it is logical, it is rational to believe in God and to believe that Jesus is God. We have 15 minutes. I would love to have a little discussion, a little chit-chat, a little talk about anything that we've discussed throughout this series, but specifically if you would like to talk about any of the things that we dealt with tonight. Again, like I said, there are volumes and volumes of evidential books written, about why we should believe Jesus rose from the dead and all that kind of stuff. But that's not what I wanted this series to be. I wanted this series to be through reason and logic and rational thought that Christianity is true. And I think we've dealt with a lot in here that really helps us think through some of these things.